Hello, Stuart Bray here with a look at some cheap airbrushes. Now, the thing about airbrushes is they're very, very nice things for spraying up makeups and, doing intricate kind of paint jobs. But very often you pay a lot of money for something like an Iwata or a very nice high-end airbrush. And I do have those for painting, but you don't need that level of engineering and that quality for spraying something as simple as cap plastic, which we'll often do when we're spraying up appliances. So you'll be spraying a fine mist of cap plastic in a mold. You can apply the cap plastic with a brush, but almost always it's better with an airbrush. So I've taken a look at a few cheap airbrushes that work very well for this kind of stuff. In this video, I am looking at this one from Central Pneumatic. I bought this from Harbour Freight, which is a US company, and they have a lot of shops all over the place that sell inexpensive tools, and this is no exception. So let's have a quick look and see what you think and whether or not this would be useful for you in your workshop. So this inexpensive airbrush kit is from, well, it's made by Central Pneumatic, but it's been bought from Harbour Freight, which is a well-known supplier of pretty cheap tools based in the States. So if you're after a sort of cheapy single action airbrush that will do the job for spraying cap plastic, you could do a lot worse than this one. This was about $11, I think, so with tax, depending where you are, you're looking more like $12 to sort of $13 for this airbrush. So it's a very basic single action airbrush, as you can see. Had this kind of single body with a little trigger there on the top. It just kind of sits inside there, nice and easy, and just pulls off. It's a siphon airbrush, so it'll suck up the liquid from the base container by basically the effect of the air passing over the top. So these two nozzles line up, so make sure that they line up. Obviously you can see there's a little bit of adjustment there because it's a cheap airbrush, but just make sure that that is in line with that nozzle there, and they just attach, like I say, nice and easy. So you can unscrew this to retrieve your adapter so you can connect your air hose to your compressor. The bottles themselves are not made of glass, they are a plastic, and I'll just do a check to see that it can withstand acetone, because obviously if you're going to be using this with cap plastic and you put acetone cap plastic through this and it just destroys the plastic, it would be good to know that before you start. So I'll put some acetone into this one. It's only been in for a couple of minutes, but you can kind of see there's a kind of a milkiness. It's kind of going cloudy on the plastic in a way that one that hasn't had any solvents put in it at all, you can kind of see the difference. So I am suspicious of that. I think this will probably break down with acetone pretty quickly, so it's probably not suitable for acetone cap plastic, unfortunately. So you could try and find a glass jar of the same dimension with that thread size on it, which I'm sure is not going to be a massive problem, but it's worth noting that the acetone cap plastic is, would mess with that, because the acetone is going to etch into this kind of plastic. You could use alcohol-based cap plastic, the IPA stuff like Super Baldies, that would work. Alcohol doesn't seem to have any problems with it. So you've got the jar and the airbrush unit itself, the actual body, they all seem fine. Again, with these cheap airbrushes you will get these kind of coiled spring kind of hoses, which are not amazing. This one's not too springy, which is kind of nice, because when they're really strongly sprung, they often just pull the airbrush over as soon as you let go of it. So it's quite nice that this plastic tubing is a little bit slacker. If you can get a braided hose or a fabric braided hose, they're better, but obviously that comes at additional expense, and the whole point of this is a really cheap unit. It's pretty easy to connect up your hose to the airbrush. It's probably easier just to kind of twirl that around like that. If you need to get a little extra grip, just a tiny fraction of a turn using a pair of pliers, not too much, otherwise you'll just stress the seals and maybe break the brush doing that. So to connect up the hose to the compressor, we should just see if that'll fit. Seems like a good fit, but again, just to get a little extra tightness on there, I'm going to use pliers. As always, a very important thing to keep a hold of are the instructions, because it will give you obviously how to assemble it, but also a little bit of troubleshooting stuff, and more importantly than anything else, it gives you a parts list with the names of things. So if you need to order any replacement parts, you know what to actually call them to get them, because they've actually listed them and given them names. So always make sure you retain the instructions, because they're always going to be handy for later. As is my way with these things, I'm going to be using the podcast orange. You secure that lid and you're good to go. As is the case with all siphon fed airbrushes, you're going to notice there's a tiny hole at the top, and just make sure that that's clear, because if you're using something that may block that hole, it'll prevent the air from being able to go in when the airbrush is being used. So sometimes when you get a blockage, maybe the first thing to do is just check that hole is actually clear, because like I say, if it isn't, it can cause problems. So one thing I've noticed with this is the amount of precision required to get that lined up. So if I show you the very top here, nothing's coming out, but if I move this down closer to it, you'll see that it does come out. So it's quite critical, the placement between these two shapes, and obviously this being plastic, it can kind of move around a bit, so you may have to sort of do something like pack it out from underneath to lift that up so that it's in the right position to actually blow right across the top. So I'm just going to make a sweet little adjustment on there just to see if that's going to make it work better. Okay, so I've literally just jammed a piece of wood. You can see a little splintered piece of wood in there, and that seems to have lifted that up so that it's much more likely to work. You can kind of see that the alignment has to be spot on. If it moves slightly, like if it's slightly to one side, it's not going to work as well. You need to make sure that that's dead center and almost touching, so it's right on top of it. And then when you do that, it does seem to work. So just bear that in mind. It may be worth just playing around with that to get that to actually work properly. So let's have a little spray with this. As you can see, you get nice even coverage. It seems to work quite nicely, which is good. I've turned the pressure down and nothing's coming out at all now, so I'm not getting anything out. That seems to be working now. So I turn that down to 30 psi, but I don't think we can go any lower than that. If it's lower than 30 psi, it doesn't seem to create enough effect to actually pull the fluid up the tube, so that's worth knowing. Let's try at 20, and yeah, nothing's happening at 20. 25, I'm getting something, but it's a little bit spitty spotty, it's kind of missing, it's not reliable enough. So 30 seems to be the magic number. So you're not getting anything precise with this, there's no precision, but it does work. So it'd be great for cat plastic, but not ideal. It's not bad for 12 bucks, I guess. Cleanup, pretty straightforward. That's one of the good things about this. Obviously, if you've used anything to pack that out, make sure you're careful when you take that off. But there's no mess really on the brush itself, so that's very, very easy to keep clean. And then with regards to your paint container, just keep back the stuff you don't want to throw away. So that's a good colour, we can use that again later. So keep it somewhere where it won't dry out. And then this we can just wash out with water, rinse it out with water. Obviously, if you've used an alcohol-based substance, you may want to wash it out with alcohol, 99% isopropyl alcohol. I wouldn't recommend using acetone with it because it doesn't seem to like acetone at all. That's just the nature of the plastic it is made of. But obviously use the appropriate solvent needed to keep it clean, and then keep it dry, and you should be good to go again. But as a very basic, cheap bit of kit, it's not bad at all actually. It's just not very refined. There's no sort of adjustment or precision involved in it, but it would be absolutely ideal for cat plastic, no question. I think it's perfect for that kind of thing. Because you've got 4 of these containers, it's nice and easy that you can wash them out, but you can also obviously just use different pots for different colours and then wash them out at the end rather than having to wash them out in between. So that's pretty handy. You can use a Q-tip or a cotton bud to clean inside there and around the thread, and that does a pretty good job of keeping it clean. Very simple to maintain, I'll give it that. Hopefully that was useful to you. Now, please, if you haven't already, do check out our podcast. It's called Battles with Bits of Rubber, and you'll find it wherever there are podcasts. Also, check out our website, battleswithbitsofrubber.com. We have a merch store and our extensive blog posts that cover all the materials and things that we look at. Thanks for watching.